Have you ever wondered what limbo looks like? Well, welcome to Cargabendoro. This small northern town in the Central African Republic is the location of a sprawling camp for those internally displaced by conflict. Up to 20,000 people have lived here for the last 6 months, since dozens of civilians, many of them children, were butchered by the Seleka militia. Olive is among those who now call this cramped and unhygienic camp their home. With her husband having been killed by the Seleka, she struggles to raise and feed her children. But sadly, this situation is nothing new. It's always a country's children who are most impacted by any conflict. There's a fragile peace for now in Cargabendoro between the Seleka and the opposing anti-Balaka. And yet Olive says her family is stuck in limbo. As much as they want to return to their nearby home, she says it isn't yet safe. But for these two boys, doing so is a comfort. It reminds them of what once was, but conversely, also of what might have been. Edward and his brother Jean were getting ready for school the day the armed men came and burned down their home. They now live in the camp in fear, unable to return to school. Theirs is a childhood interrupted, a childhood lost. But this is just the latest chapter in a crisis dating back to 2013. A crisis in an obscure West African country that has largely gone unreported by the media. And like the shell of the brothers' former home, the Central African Republic is a house without windows. Even before the crisis began, the Central African Republic was regarded as one of the worst countries in the world to be a child. The mother of 3-year-old Abigail had to walk 35 miles just to get to this hospital in Cabo. With an advanced case of malaria and a severe respiratory infection, doctors say she was brought here just in time. Since gaining independence in 1960, recurrent coups and political crises has meant the country's infrastructure has developed little. Government health facilities across this vast country are few, as are skilled medical staff and medicines. This hospital in Cabo, and many others across the country, is run by Doctors Without Borders. The humanitarian organisation has stepped into the void and become the country's de facto health service. Without this assistance, these mothers would have nowhere else to take their sick children. Malaria is so common here that the hospital's doctors have all the kids in this triage area take a mandatory test before their consultation. During the dry season, rates of malaria are high, as many families decide to sleep outside to escape the stifling heat. But others have no choice but to do so. They fled militias at a moment's notice, with no time to grab their mosquito nets. But poverty and insecurity mean malnutrition is also a big problem. Weekly sessions are run to inform mothers like these about the importance of nutrition and a balanced diet. While these sessions are educational, they offer, just as importantly, some escapism. Insecurity has long limited access to education and social activities here and bred a numbness in the population. These sessions, with their songs and games, help to re-establish a bond between a mother and her sick child. But the recent crisis has also forced Doctors Without Borders to be more proactive and look beyond the walls of its hospital. Thousands of displaced people, many of them children, now live in camps like this one on the outskirts of Cabo. Each week, mobile health promoters cycle around the camps to offer advice on sanitation and malaria prevention. It's a vital lifeline for these desperate families displaced by conflict. The pen is heavy, but the shovel is light. So goes the well-worn phrase that's whispered in the classrooms of Carnot. Many parents here can't afford to send their kids to school in the southwest corner of the Central African Republic, so they are sent to the mines instead. After all, why go to school when you could become rich in a day? All that is needed is a little know-how, muscle, and luck. But Felix and Blaise, who are just 16 and 13, had no other choice. Their parents were killed by the Seleka, and they now have to fend for themselves. Day in and day out, they now dig and sieve for diamonds under a blazing sun. They found just one diamond in the last year, but still they dream of striking it rich. But for those children who do decide to go to school, there's no guarantee of a brighter future. Here in Wanu, over 60 kids crowd under a thatched roof. There are no computers, no textbooks, no stationery. And with the lack of professionally trained teachers in the country, village elders are called upon to become educators. Gaston used to be a truck driver for a diamond company, and he only went to primary school for a few years himself. And the recent conflict has only exacerbated this dire situation. Teachers were targeted and killed. Children were too scared to go to school. Only recently have they started to trickle back into the classrooms. Adama is one of them. She only started to go to school when she was 10, but her education was derailed the day the anti-Balaka came, the day her father was killed in front of her.
Conjugaison, le verbe manger, au passé composé, j'ai mangé, tu as mangé, il a mangé.
On the run, and then confined to an enclave in Carnot, she was unable to return to the classroom for over a year. But now, thanks to a school run by the Norwegian Refugee Council, she's enjoying what many of us take for granted, an education. But years after the conflict began, a quarter of schools still remain closed across the country due to damage inflicted by militias and insecurity. Only a third of children are enrolled. And the lure of the diamond mines is too strong for many to resist. These children, who should be in the classroom and not the pits, risk injury and even being buried alive by collapsing walls. But as they say, what choice do they have? But issues facing this nation's children are not just in remote, far-flung corners of what is one of the least developed countries in the world. In the capital of Bangui, street kids are so commonplace they're just part of the urban tapestry, white noise, a nuisance that people have learned to live with. The streets quickly make men of young boys like these, boys who have fled physical abuse at home, as well as accusations of witchcraft. And the recent conflict has been an orphan factory, causing the numbers of street children in the city to explode. These are the boys of Bangui. Many of them eke out a living through begging, stealing, physical labour, or even prostitution. But this gang of boys has unearthed another way to make money: flower arranging. Working where they sleep, they sell these potted plants to foreign aid workers. They don't make much between them, but at least they'll have a hot meal tonight. Their homework completed, these boys make the most of the fading light. So many childhoods have been shipwrecked on the streets here, through war, through abuse, through poverty. But here, there's a glimmer of hope for these boys of Bangui. This is Voix de Coeur, the only centre for street children in the Central African Republic. The centre gives them a home, a sanctuary, a safe place to sleep, a place to escape the physical dangers of sleeping rough in shop doorways, on roundabouts, or underneath the wooden stalls of the local market. A place away from physical and sexual violence, away from the drug dealers. Here, at Voix de Coeur, they can learn to be kids again. They can create friendships, draw, play, and return to school. The children of the Central African Republic grow up in a country whose infrastructure has been crippled by decades of misrule, corruption, and conflict. Poverty is rife, and unemployment is high in this former French colony. So what chance do street children have? Thankfully, the Voix de Coeur Centre is training these former street kids to become mechanics. But importantly, it's a hand up, not a handout. And on the other side of Bangui, in the sweltering cabin, business is booming for these three young tailors. Stephanie, Anita, and Mediane are rushing to complete the 10 new orders for shirts and dresses they received this morning. It's hard to believe just a few years ago these teenagers were living on the streets, either orphaned by the war or to flee physical abuse at home. They say the training from the Voix de Coeur Centre has saved them, given them a life away from the streets and from a life of prostitution. Back at the centre, the boys sing their nightly prayers. They thank God for the food that they eat, for the roof over their heads. And they pray for a brighter future.